Hello everyone, my name is Robert. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a show where I discuss the political news of the day and I provide my analysis in a way everyone can understand. Well, it has been a quite busy week. I believe I said last episode it's been kind of dry it was kind of dry last week. So it's been a very busy week, full of many little October surprises. If you don't know what October surprise is, it's basically the idea that in October, right before the election in November, something is going to change up the election. Like something big is going to happen. We've had quite a few big things. Things from hurricanes to legal issues to a vice presidential debate to a port strike to U.S. economy reports and things in between, and as well as stuff in the Middle East. So let me first open up by the vice presidential debate. That was probably, that's kind of the first thing that really, well, the first thing was the hurricane. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but the hurricane, both Kamala, Biden, and Trump have been there with Hurricane Helene. I think the death toll as of recording last I checked is over 200 people. Hopefully that gets fixed. It's going to take many years for people to recover, and of course our thoughts and prayers are with them. And I believe this is the deadliest hurricane in the United States since Hurricane Katrina almost 20 years ago. And then came the debate. So I didn't actually watch the debate, and to be honest, I probably never will. But, so we're not going to do this giant full montage like I have the last two debates. Really, I want to summarize what I've read and what people have told me, is that Vance looked very polished and professional, while Walz looked very nervous, but he did get better toward the end of the debate. Coming out of it, Vance and Walz were tied in terms of who did best. There was a couple polls that said Vance did slightly better, maybe 1 or 2%. It really wasn't that much. And let me throw in there their favorability, according to 538 on average. Tim Walz's favorability rating is plus 4.5. That means 4.5% more people have a favorable view of him than have an unfavorable, and then J.D. Vance is underwater at 9.9%. His favorability has always been low, which is hit, and compared to Kamala Harris is plus 0.8. So Walz and Harris have a somewhat similar favorability rating. Walz is a little bit more favorable, and then Trump and Vance have an almost identical favorability, with Trump at minus 9.6. So that's basically that. I think I said this in the last episode. I highly doubt this will change anything. I think even if one of them did really badly, it still wouldn't change it, because people don't really vote for vice president. They're voting for who's at the top of the ticket. Of course, I would say even if Trump loses, I still think J.D. Vance kind of cemented himself as a big part of the party. And the reason for that is because first of all, he's kind of a new darling of Trump. Trump loves people who were former enemies but now are big supporters. And also, J.D. Vance has followed a lot of the policies that Trump has implemented. I mean, so many people in the party, but I think he is kind of seen as the heir apparent, because say that Trump loses, it's highly likely that it's going to be, people are going to say, well, it was stolen from him, but now Trump is too old, so it's got to be J.D. Vance. He's going to be the next one. He did decently well, and I think a lot of people who are pro-Trump will support him after the election, because I think if he wins, if Trump wins, then he will almost certainly be the nominee in 2028, the J.D. Vance. But if he's not, I think it'll be a somewhat competitive primary, but I think Vance would be a candidate. Let me also say there was a port strike. It lasted 2.5 to 3 days. There's a tentative agreement that will last until January 15th, 2025, so that's right before Biden leaves office. And the agreement is 62% raise over 6 years, which is about 10% a year. This is supposed to be a tentative agreement, as I said. They want the unions want more time to negotiate. This at least avoided a devastating strike. Yes, the strike did happen, but it's not quite as devastating as I think it would have been. I was in Lowe's earlier, and I already started to see the limit on toilet paper and paper towels. It was like it was 2020 all over again. There were some stores across the country that did slowly run out as panic buying began, and to be honest, I almost considered going to the store and buying a bunch of toilet paper. but I think we're gonna be good. It's gonna take some time to clear out the backlog, but I don't anticipate any. It doesn't, and neither are economists anticipating major strikes, major shortages, and hopefully the strike doesn't begin again in January. Speaking of the U.S. economy, on Friday we reported a whopping 254,000 new jobs were created in the month of September, and this is the highest since March. There were 159,000 jobs created in August. And then that was in August, so now we're up over 100, almost 100,000 more jobs in September than in August, and the Dow Jones was estimating 150,000 were to be created. The unemployment rate fell once again to 4.9%, and this is the lowest since June. And wages are now up 4% over a year ago, and inflation is we haven't gotten an inflation report, but inflation in August was 2.5%. So as of now, Americans are making 1.5% more. Like, we're 1.5% above inflation, which is good. Larry Summers, who was an Obama-era economist, he said that the Fed's half-point rate cut was a mistake, and frankly, I agree. I think that half-point rate cut might be too much. I don't think this is going to necessarily reignite inflation, but it will probably prevent any future rate cuts between now and the next few months. It is showing that the U.S. economy is probably not going into recession this year. Well, it definitely wasn't going to happen this year, but it's probably not going to happen until at least the middle of next year. I highly doubt this quarter is going to show any shrinking in GDP. Then, I think what might be the big news of the week, the biggest news, would be the escalating Middle East tensions. Of course, I believe it was last week, Israel struck Hezbollah, which is the political organization in Lebanon, which is to their north, and then Iran reacted by sending 180 ballistic missiles. And the Iron Dome, which is Israel's defense system that was paid for by all of us, it's approximately 90% effective, but that means that there were almost certainly some missiles that got in, at least a few, maybe more. For context, it takes about 12 minutes for a missile to get from Tehran to Jerusalem. So Biden said Israel's considering attacking Iranian oil and nuclear facilities. Now, this caused oil to jump up 9% in the last week. Oil prices have been going up and away. Not quite as bad as it was during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that's mostly because Israel and Gaza are not oil-producing countries. I mean, they produce a little bit of oil, but not enough to disrupt the global market. However, Iran is. Iran makes over 4 million barrels of oil a day, which is about a third of the capacity of the United States. And if Iran's oil capacity was wiped to zero, that would almost certainly cause global oil prices to shoot up. Way up, because you're taking all that oil supply off the market. Now, Iranian oil is under heavy sanction, but China has been buying the Iranian oil at an extreme discount, just like they've been buying Russian oil at extreme discount. So the U.S. sanctions on Iran and Russia have not worked, at least not for oil. And OPEC could, in theory, they have about 5 million barrels of spare capacity, so OPEC could increase oil production, which they will do starting in December, but I don't think they're going to rush to try to lower oil prices. They've been wanting higher oil prices. In fact, Saudi Arabia's wanted $100 oil. They have been they have officially abandoned the $100 oil target because they realize that there isn't global demand for $100 oil, especially as the global economy has been slowing. But I'm sure they would not rush to lower global oil prices. Kamala has said, "I condemn this attack unequivocally," and she said her commitment to Israel is unwavering. This could be a bit of a problem for her because, especially in Michigan, where there are many, many Arab Americans, I would think that this could cost her some support. Not that necessarily they're going to go vote for Trump, but I think that they're going to vote for nobody, or they might vote for Jill Stein or vote for the Libertarian candidate. Trump has said Israel should hit the nuclear facilities, and that's a whole other thing. Biden has said he's not supporting a nuclear facility attack because that would cause extreme instability in the global markets, even more than it has already been created. So let me throw out there, Jack Smith has released a 165-page dossier of sorts. This came out earlier this week, right after the debate, I believe. We learned that Trump has pressured in the last few months of his presidency, pressured Ronna McDaniel, who at the time was the RNC chairwoman, to promote false claims that the Michigan voting machines were manipulated. And the Speaker of the House in Michigan has said that was effing nuts. The big question here is they need to prove, because remember, Trump has immunity according to the Supreme Court for things that were done in his official capacity. They need to prove that not only Trump did this, did whatever they're accusing him of, but they need to prove it that it was in his capacity as a candidate and not as a president. Because if it was in the capacity as the president, then it's covered by Supreme Court immunity. But if it's in the capacity as a candidate, then it is not covered and Trump could be prosecuted. Of course, if he wins the election, this case is completely moot, as Trump will dismiss it because he will be in charge of the Justice Department once more. All right, the last big thing I want to talk about is the lower elections. We talked a lot about the presidential elections. I don't get to talk about the state elections quite as much. According to the generic ballot, which is people who are going to vote for Democrat, will you vote for a Democrat? Will you vote for a Republican? Democrats have actually had a decent, a small but not insignificant lead over the last month or so, which I believe the last time I talked about this, it was about tied. So at 538 has Democrats up by 2, and Real Clear Politics has them up by 1.8. So in 2020 and in 2012, between now and the election, it did not change. In 2016, it did. Republicans rocketed up, and they closed the gap. So I don't know what's going to happen here. Obviously, I can't predict the future, but I would think the gap is not going to change very much, especially in 2016, Trump's support did rise toward the end. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen here. So I would think that with a small lead in the generic ballot, Democrats really need a bigger lead than 2%. In the last election, in 2022, Democrats were down by about 3%. They actually got a surprisingly low percentage of the vote compared to the amount of seats they got. But I would think 2% lead, first of all, it's not going to stay at 2%. It's going to, that wouldn't be the final result because there's many undecided voters. But if it did stay at 2%, that might not be enough for them to take the House majority because there's a lot of incumbents that are Republican incumbents that they would need to take out, especially in New York and California, which I'm not entirely sure they will do. So that would likely mean, as I've been talking with some people, a narrow Republican majority, perhaps even narrower than the one we have right now, which would only create even more chaos. If you thought the last 2 years were chaotic, a narrower majority with Mike Johnson remaining as Speaker would be even worse. And if you ask me, I think Mike Johnson, his job might be under threat if they lose the majority. But if they keep a majority at a narrow, like if they lose a seat or two, and Trump wins, Mike Johnson's job is going to be on the line. Because I think a lot of Republicans, especially on the right, are going to be like, this guy is not working. Even though he's doing quite a good job, if you ask me, considering the situation he's been put in. As for the Senate, we have a little bit of an easier way to predict this. A Republican majority at this point is almost certain. I would put it at over 90%. The reason is because the current makeup of the Senate is 51-49. That includes West Virginia, and considering Joe Manchin's not running again, that seat is completely gone. There's no way they're going to hold on to that. So that would make the Senate 50-50. But John Tester, who is a senator in Montana, is down by over 6%. And his opponent in the polls has an average lead of 51%. Tim Sheehy is almost certain to win the seat. I put it at likely. I put it at 70% chance. So maybe 80%. So that would be 49-51. Republicans would have one more seat than they technically need under a Harris presidency. I do expect Brown in Ohio, he's a Democrat, I would expect him to hold on. He has a 3% lead in the polls. That's narrow, but I think he will. Ted Cruz is a Republican in Texas. He's only ahead by about 3.5 to 4%. So that could be a tight race, but I think he will hold on as well as all the Republicans or all the Democrats in the Rust Belt. But if Republicans were able to take one or more of those seats, that would be great for them as well. So what are we looking at right now? We are looking at a Republican Congress, maybe a Democratic House, maybe, but a Republican Congress with Kamala Harris as president. I think that is the most likely outcome, which would make her a very ineffective president. She would not be able to get a lot of legislation done. Her cabinet would struggle to get approved by the Senate. If it's a narrow majority, there might be some Republicans like Susan Collins who might be willing to support him, but any radical picks are not going to be making it through. And she's going to have a hard time implementing her budget. When she has to propose her budget in the spring, it's going to pretty much be dead on arrival. Republicans are not going to be willing to go for that. As well as abortion rights, that's not going to happen either, because there's going to be no Democratic majority. Republicans are not going to support a bill to codify abortion rights, although I think at this point they'd be smart to do that and put this issue to bed. But they're not going to do that. I would expect to see some more immigration posturing from Republicans in Congress. They're going to try to get that border wall done, even if Kamala is elected. They might have enough leverage to do that. Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to see. And I would expect them to try to do some manipulating with the tax cuts, because that's going to be a big thing. Kamala wants to raise taxes on the ultra-wealthy, while Republicans want to keep taxes low for everybody. Alrighty, except for the tariffs, of course, which would raise taxes on everybody effectively. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say. This was a jam-packed episode. Hopefully you were able to follow. You might have to listen to it more than once. The next episode, I'm going to be talking, if the Trump campaign is still behind in the polls, I'm going to be talking about some ways they can turn it around, because I do think there's a couple of things they could do to change the course of the race. But at this point, even then, it might be too late. So, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and share the show with your friends, and thanks for listening, and have a great week. Bye-bye.